And good afternoon, welcome, and aloha. Thank you so very much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Ron Mizutani. I'm the president and the CEO of PBS Hawaiʻi, and we thank you for joining us for this very special presentation. It's an exclusive event featuring a very sneak peek of the Indie Lands pop-up apart. And I think if you watch this entire program, uh, probably not a dry eye in the house when it comes to some of the emotions that were shared. This episode you saw today will be airing on Monday, February 21st on PBS Hawaii at 9 p.m. and also available on demand at pbshawaii.org. Joining us this afternoon for Q&A session, and we're very grateful to have with us Noriko Namiki. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the YWCA on Oahu. We have Jen Wilber, Director of Advocacy at the YWCA Oahu, and also Lois Kim, a Fernhurst Alumni, who will share her experiences having gone through incarceration herself. We thank everyone for your questions. We're going to get to as many as we can. I see that we have one right now, and let's start with you, Noriko. Please set the stage for women in incarceration in Hawaii. The numbers, are we seeing a growth? What's it like right now in Hawaii?
Sure, Ron. Thank you so much for having us. I had to actually really look at also some of the slides, this film showed. One is like the history of incarceration in this country is really closely tied to the war on drugs, which, President Nixon launched in June of 1971. So what happened almost like 51 years later, as the film mentioned, actually, the number of women in US prisons, has risen 800%. And then also as a result of that, and then also actually United States, has the highest, population in prison and jails, across the world, actually in the world. We're number one, it's not a really good statistics we have, but that's where we are today. And also 2.3 million people are incarcerated, and more millions are paroled, and then also on probation. And then also over 2.8 million women enter the criminal justice system in this country every year. And of those, about 231,000 women are locked up as we speak. So what's happening in Hawaii? So in that time also, let's see, when the war on drugs took place, it was initiated in the 1970s, we had less than 20 women incarcerated in Hawaii. Today, we have almost 400 women in Hawaii's prison and jails. And then also about 80% of them, they are mothers. And then that's what the film said. And then also, at Fernhurst, our transitional housing facility, we serve women directly, coming out of, YWCA, and we have the similar statistics too. About 80% of those are mothers, and about half of them became mothers, before their, age of 18. So
those are sobering numbers, Noriko.
Yes.
Lois, but these are not just numbers, these are human beings. And you being one of them that went through the Fernhurst program. Life in prison, incarceration is very tough. Coming out of prison has its challenges. Please share with us, as you watch this film, how did you feel?
Thank you, Ron. It was a really tough documentary for me to watch because it was very real. Although they're incarcerated in a different state, some of the things were very similar to what I personally went through. And I myself am a recovering drug addict as well. For me, the hardest part was to see how Bailey, Tomika's child, kind of took in and how it affected her to hear for the first time that her mom isn't in college. She's actually incarcerated. At first, it seemed like she didn't understand what her mom was saying, but then when she broke down and cried and said she was embarrassed for her mother, it really resonated with me. For me, myself, I abandoned my children long before I got incarcerated. The horrible thing about drug addiction is it wipes away your moral compass. It pulls you for a high and it makes you forget about all the responsibilities that you have. So I found myself abandoning my child because the pull to my addiction was so strong. As drug addiction ends up, you usually end up dying or getting incarcerated. And for me, luckily, I got incarcerated. While I was incarcerated, I had lost the only connection to the real world, which was my mom. She died of cancer. So I had no way of contacting my children, no way of contacting anyone. So I did my whole 2-year stint alone. And by watching that documentary, I think I might have been sheltered against the reality of it. And seeing that made me realize what my children probably went through. Coming out of incarceration is equally as tough. Fighting against stigma, fighting against the debilitating guilt that you have for what you put your family through. For me, I can luckily say that I've recalibrated my moral compass, and I feel like north points to north now and south is south, but that still doesn't take away the lingering guilt that I have. So with that guilt, what I do is I try to do better. I try to be a better mom. I try to be in my children's lives, but still respect their boundaries. And today, I think I've successfully achieved that. I'm also hypersensitive to my actions because I publicly and transparently announce that I am a felon and a recovering addict. And I do that because I want to erase people's stigma. So every accomplishment, every accolade that I have, I do that to prove to everybody that we are more than just statistics. We are strong survivors, we are warriors. And on top of that, I have the community support, such as the YWCA, who allowed me to have a safe place where I no longer feared getting robbed, where I didn't feel like anybody would rape me, and none of my neighbors were drug addicts. So it helped me focus on rebuilding my life.
Lois, thank you so much for sharing that. And that your testimony is very powerful. I've heard your testimony in the past, and every time you speak with so much passion and compassion. I appreciate that. Jen, I got to ask you, as an advocate and as the YWCA is very much an important part of this puzzle, what Lois just spoke of is so very true. The stigma that continues to stay with the ladies, and when they get out of the incarceration, including the guilt that they feel that they lost all those years. How do you balance that with community and still provide them opportunities to succeed and get jobs and get housing?
So I think we do that through our policy work and trying to change different policies and open the eyes of different, from city and county to state, to open the eyes and having Lois share her story with them so they can put a face to the policy, really, to really personalize it. Because I think that we all have different stigmas about different people and things. And I think that really opening people's eyes and making it more tangible to them makes the policy go, much further. I also think that the work done by Task Force 85, Noriko did some of that work in 2017. The report came out in 2018, which said that Hawaii needs to move from a punitive to a rehabilitative state. Really helps and informs our work. And now we just are really trying to move policies forward with intention of really moving Hawaii in that direction.
Yeah, it's going to take a while for folks to get to understand that we're not just statistics, that these are human beings. And which kind of sets the tone for this next question. And I'm going to leave it up to all three of you who want to answer. Why do drug addicts, and thank you for the question, by the way, why do drug addicts have to be incarcerated instead of being helped with medical, educational, social services help, which costs more?
I am not sure about the exact cost of each programming, but I really want to think of like a future like investment. What would that mean for the entire community? And I think there are many conversations about that in terms of how do we help people who have some addiction issues with drugs. And is the prison the best place, for them to be? Because in the state, as we see, actually prisons have been used, in lieu of hospitals, in lieu of treatment, because we do not have enough resources for those people. So they have to, go all the way down the spiral, so that to the point where they'll be arrested. And then it's incredible, actually. Lois kind of said that, but I've heard many women saying when they were, arrested, it could be like you may feel fear, but the first thing they often said was that they were relieved because they no longer have to run and they no longer have to, be on the street, and then they might get help. So I think that this is definitely, we need to continue the conversation about it. What is the good, environment for those people instead of putting them just in prison?
The Fernhurst furlough program is very well, it's credible. It has so many success stories. But this person is asking, again, thank you for your questions. What existing programs or future programs are there on our neighbor islands? And that's a great question. This is not Oahu-centric. This is a statewide ordeal.
Yes. Just to give you like a little landscape, we have 4 jails in the state of Hawaii, and we have 4 prisons. And those are, for jails are more like, I know I'm simplifying it, but more people like waiting, trials, or people who've been sentenced for misdemeanors, like lighter charges. And once you are convicted of felony charges, and then you are sent to prisons, those are correctional community, center. One facility for women, women's, community correctional center in Kailua, with the bed capacity of about 260. And when they come out of that facility, do we have enough resources? Even on Oahu, we don't. So when you think about neighbor islands, the resources are really, I think, limited. And then we know there are a few women's organizations, who are providing some services, whether as they come out of their prison, or jails, they get whether some baskets, because in Hawaii, many states across the country, they provide what's called like a gate money, so that people coming out of the criminal justice system, they have some money, whether it's $200 or $300. Hawaii, as of today, we have nothing. So those are actually left to the efforts of volunteers and community members. So we do have a lot more to do.
Lois, someone named Shannon is asking you, did writing your book help you transition? And if so, how?
Yes, it did. It actually helped give me therapeutic support while in prison. Prison is not actually a really safe place to dive into emotions and to grieve or to process things. So for me, I bottled everything up and not realizing it. I refused to feel anything, even though I felt like I had overwhelming grief and guilt. While incarcerated, like I said, my mom had passed away, and I was dealing with knowingly abandoning my children. So the first book, Mommy Loves You, really helped me. I sat down, and I think it came out in about 2 minutes. It came out to be an apology to my children and to my mother. Long story short, the book is about, moms have to go away either for short amounts of time, like a few minutes to the grocery store, or indefinitely, like my mom's case. But at the end of the day, mommy still loves you. So it was very therapeutic. And then coming out of incarceration, when I was able to publish the book, I got to speak to a lot more people and share my journey and share my story. And I think that helped kind of help me live my personal goals in erasing stigma. It gave me an opportunity to have a platform to show people that we are not just numbers, we're not just statistics, that we're people, we're mothers, and we want to survive. We just made a mistake in our past.
Jen, a question, this might be a tough one to even ask, but there are those who reoffend. That's not a secret. And that's real. How many do reoffend? And also, when it comes to employment and job searches, that's a huge hurdle as well, especially those who do reoffend.
Ron, if I may, for me personally, I think my sisters reoffend because they lose hope. And it is because they get jobs and not careers. Doors are closed on them, and we haven't successfully erased the stigma. So they come into this battlefield of hopelessness where they feel like they're alone and they have no way out. So the streets call to them again. Their addiction calls to them again. And that's where their comfort zone is. For me, I was lucky to find Care Hawaii, who employs people that, they don't see them for their mistakes, only see them for their attributes. I was lucky, but I don't think my sisters are so lucky.
Jen, same question. Can you please answer?
I think that, Lois touched on many of the things. It's careers. There was a bill passed, I think 4 years ago, that mandated that PSD had to give IDs to those that were leaving incarceration, but still many are leaving without identification. So without basic identification, how can you get, an above the table, like a job or housing? And so if we're releasing people just to figure out everything on their own, is just let them out the gates, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. We have another question here. It's a lengthy one, so bear with me. This person teaches sociology at Windward Community College. Many of the students are from Hawaii Island and would like to have transitional housing on the Big Island. they've noted that being in an Oahu transitional program doesn't help them reintegrate into their home community, nor does it help them reestablish close relationships with their families and friends. What options do they have?
Currently,
Very limited.
yeah. I think there is whether clean and sober housing for women. I understand on the Big Island, and then again, I think there are a few resources, but not like a housing for them. And then so it's interesting. So we take women from all across the state because again, we're the only program available that takes women directly out of prison. And then also WCCA, we it's not just Oahu women from all islands, and some women actually from the neighbor islands, they choose to stay on Oahu because sometimes because the family actually contributed to their trauma. Many women, they have history of whether sexual physical abuse during in their childhood or in their adulthood, and then sometimes it's not good for them to go back to that where that began. But so those women choose to stay on Oahu, so we help them. But I totally understand. I think many women, they want to go back, and many of our women do go back, and we really try to help them make that transition because it help for them to get a job on Oahu while they're in the program, and then having to look for something on their home island, it's going to be tough. So I think there has to be a lot more resources also across the state.
Lois, you talked about sisterhood, and you saw it in the documentary. It's very real. Sisterhood while you're in prison, and even post incarceration when you're out of prison. What's that bond like? Do you still have communication? Do you still have relationships?
That's a two-sided answer. The sisterhood is very real. If you can imagine, you're in the darkest place, in your darkest time, and you need some kind of bonding, someone to reach out to. So you build sisterhood within the prison cells, and that sisterhood goes on, and they become like your mock family at that moment, because I think a lot of women are maternal, and we look out for each other. For me, there are very few relationships that I held on to till now, because I had to make the selfish decision to keep myself safe, because some did reoffend, and it breaks my heart because I couldn't be there to help them. But at that same moment, I really had to look out for myself and my children. But on the positive side, there are a few that I still keep in contact with, and we tell each other we love each other every day, and their accomplishments are my joy. Their sad days are my sad moments, and vice versa.
It's very nice. Thank you, Lois, for sharing that. Jen, another question about, advocacy is the ticket. I mean, without funds, without money, the programs like Fernhurst, YWCA won't exist. This person said, can you speak more about the current proposed legislation regarding programs in this session?
Sure. There are several pieces of legislation touching different programs, such as training programs, but the ones that we introduced with the help of the Women's Legislative Caucus are HB 1776 and SB 2637. And those would simply, right now in statute, it says subject to funding, they will have women's community-based work furlough. Basically, this bill does, not just basically, it just deletes the word subject to funding, because there is funding within the expansive budget of PSC to do this. So basically, it would mandate that there be at least one all the time for women in this state, so that there would be no caveat saying that there's not money this year. So it would be an investment for women going forward.
Would it be an investment statewide, though? I mean, it seems to be we have a lot of neighbor island folks joining us today.
Yes.
The neighbor islands almost feel neglected. Would you agree that's what's happening?
Definitely. There are men's programs, I believe, on other islands, men's community-based type work furlough, but women's is only on Oahu. So yes, this if this goes forward, these bills pass, or one of them passes, it will make sure there's at least one, but we would like to see them on every county. Right. There should be multiple.
Well, yeah, Noriko, I mean, it almost seems, I'm not going to say sexist, but it almost seems completely unfair that all of this attention is guided and to men when our wahine need as much help, if not more. They're mommies. They're looking for jobs, and they're looking for opportunities as well. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and then also, again, this is future investments, because like I said, 80% of incarcerated women are mothers, right? That means, they're also grandmothers. And then while they're incarcerated, their really ties are, broken with their children. And then that really affects their well-being as well. I'm not saying they're going to commit crimes, but their well-being is jeopardized. So, and imagine the harm, the hurt they have to go through, like, just Lois talked about. So I think there should be, yes, I agree, more, again, efforts, to help women coming out of prison. And I really believe that the rehabilitation has to start in prison as soon as those people are arrested and booked. And then also we have to, also remember that those people, majority of people have history of trauma. And then for them to actually be put in prison and then be separated from their families, that adds another trauma. And then as they come out of prison, finding facing challenges, with the housing and jobs and whatnot, another trauma. So, it's really difficult for them. So I really think, there has to be more resources, not just in prison, but resources put to, anything, programming outside of prison, because that's where they belong.
No, I appreciate that. Jen, I'm going to ask you real quickly if you could just share the bill number again. Somebody's asking about that.
Yeah, HB 1776 and SB 2637.
Those are important. Those are not just numbers, folks. Those are numbers those are House bills that our lawmakers are deciding on this session. If you didn't get that, please stick with us at PBS Hawaiʻi. We'll find all the information for you. Lois, I want to turn to you because, again, what I think moved a lot of us is the children and the impacts. Yes, it impacts those who are incarcerated, but our children at home, without invading your privacy, how did it impact your children? And what did they share? Their anger, their frustration, their sadness, and your child. I mean, how does that impact them post incarceration as well?
So for my daughter, she was about 4 or 5 when I started down this journey. When I finally got out and finally got in contact with her, that's when I could really process with her with what happened. I didn't know what was going on in her life. The saddest moment is when she told me that she just told all her friends that her mommy was dead. She didn't know if her mom was alive. She just went away and she died. But the bright side of that story is children are extremely resilient. And if you start to build that bond with them and that trust again and are there for them, then it almost becomes a thing of the past. My daughter said to me the other day, which really resonated with me, is that, "Oh, Mom, now I can't remember a time that you weren't ever in my life because I'm such a constant in her life now. It helps me feel a little better, but I still carry with me the guilt that I put her and my son through." My son's a little younger, so I really haven't had that conversation with him. But with my daughter, I'm extremely transparent. She's a teenager now. And for me, I hope that I could instill in her not to prejudge anyone based on their past mistakes. And regardless of how far your rock bottom is, you can always pull yourself out of it.
Thank you, Lois. I'm going to ask you to share your final thoughts in a minute or so, but please gather them while I turn to Noriko. Your final thoughts of today's film and this conversation and what community can do to help.
So basically, across the country and also in the state too, more than 90%, and I think 95%, people in the prison, in state prisons will be released. That means they will be rejoining our community. So it's not just like, I really don't want people to think, oh, this is their thing, not my thing. It is our issue. Their well-being is like really directly affects us. And then I really hope in Hawaii, we can, to work together so that we can, create a compassionate community for those coming out of prison.
Jen, same question, your final thoughts on today's film, but also more importantly, how it impacts here at home.
I think the film was amazing, but I think it also spotlighted like our fight a year and a half ago to save Fernhurst and the community, just thanking the community here for helping us. And I really think that momentum has sprung forward. And today we have over 20 something bills really kind of highlighting the different things that can help women in prison. And so I just hope the public will continue that, and so we can move with intention towards rehabilitative system.
Lois, your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are 2 points. First is gratitude. Thank you to PBS, Mr. Mizutani, to the YWCA for using your platform to eliminate the stigma and educating stakeholders of the community. My second last thought is to my sisters out there who might be going through some struggles right now. Know that the community has your support. Know that there are people out there fighting the good fight and showing them that you are a person, bringing humanistic qualities to you. There's also resources out there. You just need to go out and ask for help. Change is possible. You don't have to be an addict. You don't have to live with that felony for the rest of your life. You can make it in life. There's a lot of people rooting for you, and just keep hope alive.
Thank you. And ladies, thank you for joining us today. What a powerful discussion and an enlightenment for this community. I'm so grateful that PBS Hawaiʻi and our team decided, let's do this, because this is so very important. We need to be that vehicle, and we need to continue to be that vehicle for correct information, and also making sure that we tell the right sides of both sides of the stories. This concludes our panel discussion for now, but we thank all of you for spending your afternoon with us. PBS Hawaiʻi will be sending out a survey. We ask you to take it and see how we can improve on these efforts. We're going to do much more of these. We enjoy doing them. COVID has made us become more creative in how we get our audience, and also sharing content. That's very important. And these panel discussions are so very important. If you have a moment, please give us your feedback. And don't forget that the broadcast of this broadcast that you saw will premiere, actually. A part will be airing on Monday, February 21st on PBS Hawaiʻi at 9 p.m. Today was a sneak peek just for all of you. It will also be available on demand at pbshawaii.org. On behalf of myself and all of our panelists and our entire PBS Hawaiʻi team, mahalo nui for joining us. Until next time. Aloha.